Against all odds, I guess the debt deal has happened. It's gone through, overwhelmingly passed by the House at least. We'll see what ends up happening with the Senate, but President Biden, Kevin McCarthy appear to have gotten something like what they wanted. The vote was 314 to 117, not particularly close, obviously. And it did happen just a few days before supposedly we were about to hit the debt ceiling. 149 Republicans, 165 Democrats backed the bill. So actually more support from Democrats than Republicans, despite the fact that it is a Republican speaker. Interesting. Anyway, Kevin McCarthy greeted this saying, tonight we all made history because this is the biggest cut in savings this Congress has ever voted for. He said, by the way, that he'll be pushing for more cuts. We'll actually be talking about that in a little bit. Joe Biden says this agreement is good news for the American people and the American economy. Well, we've already, gone in depth into what was included in that final deal. If you haven't been paying attention to politics this week, though, I will remind you that amongst other things, including an overall cut for the next 2 years to the federal government, it includes stricter work requirements for food stamps, clawing back funding for IRS enforcement, $10 billion, and unspent coronavirus relief money, $30 billion, speeds the permitting of new energy projects, and officially ends Mr. Biden's student loan repayment freeze. And with all of the terrible things that were included that don't even have to do with the budget, as well as the fact that it cuts the budget over the next 2 years, Jessica, it is amazing that so many Republicans are frustrated by this because it seems really bad. What do you think?
I think it's up for debate right now. If we should have a government at all, like that's really what's at the heart of this. The idea that we should defund public programs should sound ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. If John and I have children who need to go to school and we say, all right, let's hire a teacher, let's pool our resources, get our dollars together, we're gonna hire someone to teach our kid. That wouldn't be a great quality of education, but maybe if we got everyone in the block to pool their resources together, we could hire a few teachers, maybe build a space for them to do school in. But if we got the whole city to do that, we'd have a much better situation. That's what the government's for, pooling our resources together so we can have things that the market's not going to provide at the same level or the same price, things that we really value and we want and need. The government organizes how we spend public resources to get public goods, things we value, like education for our kids' schools, roads to drive on. Usually it's healthcare now for us, it's healthcare for people who are earning below a certain amount, and Medicare for people who are older, Social Security, retirement, all of these things. That's what the budget, the public budget or the deficit, that's what that's paying for. The deficit or the public debt is a record of how many dollars we've put into the economy that haven't been taxed back out yet. And we usually do that by issuing bonds. And so what's happened is we've had this thing called the debt ceiling that's been raised 78 separate times since 1960. And what it originally was the way it worked was separate accounts would be credited. So like the Department of Education would get its own account, the DOJ, Pentagon, whatever. They wanted to put that all together into one record. And so they would make a note of how much debt would be acquired. And now it's turned into this thing of they've made it seem like this arbitrary number that's selected is a number we can't go past because of some consequences. That's not true. Like there's no actual consequences of us surpassing the debt ceiling. Only 2 countries, I'm pretty sure, in the world have a debt limit. It's just unnecessary. We have to add dollars into the economy to put real productive resources to use. There are a lot of things that banks, who also are the only other source of money entering the economy, they just won't invest in. It's not profitable for a bank to give a loan to a business person so that elderly people can receive care. Just not a profitable business enterprise. So if you're a banker or someone who is responsible for loaning out money on behalf of the bank, you need to give that money to whatever is the highest return on investment. That's your directive. So we need dollars to enter the economy to put real productive resources to use to all of those things that banks aren't incentivized to. We need public spending for the economy to function. And they're defunding it on purpose because they want people to be so desperate to sell their labor for such a low wage and work for so many hours, because that means profits will be high for the businesses that a lot of our members of Congress have stock in.
Yeah, or at the very least, their donations come from. Yeah, either from the individuals who have stock in them or own them or the actual corporations themselves. And everything that you said about the debt ceiling makes perfect sense. Especially some of it in terms of raw theory. The idea that it makes no sense makes sense in raw theory, but it does make sense to have this fight every year if you want to sort of have a built-in mechanism to constantly cause a crisis where everyone fears that the government is about to fall apart, and so any kind of cuts that are proposed are justified if that's what it takes to get us to a debt ceiling increase. Because in your example about why exactly it is that we pool our resources as a society so that we can get more out of it, that does make sense for most people. But if you don't need a lot of that stuff, sure, you need the roads and you don't want bandits to be rampaging through the town. But beyond that, you don't need aid in terms of food or housing or whatever because you're already wealthy. Well, then all of that seems needless. Why exactly am I funding that? That's where, of course, the issue falls apart, and that's why we have people who want the government to only function at a minimal level. It's because they don't need that extra aid, and they would very much not like to be taxed if that's what's required to provide it for other people that they don't give a damn about.
Yeah, and a self-fulfilling prophecy at that, right? Because if we defund education, reduce the quality of education, now maybe people won't question when we say we're going to default on our obligations as the US government, which creates the dollars and issues the currency. If anybody's not gonna default on their obligation, it's the people who can press a button and make dollars exist with simply pressing a button.
Yeah, 100%. I need to get that ability, damn it.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.